Hello, everybody. Today we are learning about people moving west, not just about how, but also some of the inventions that inspired those people to move. Yesterday and in last night's homework, we discussed manifest destiny. And remember, this is the idea that the Americans had a God-given right to expand and occupy the land in North America. And we're also discussing which purchases the Americans made and who they were made from. So throughout the 1800s or the 19th century, Americans continued to believe in manifest destiny and they moved west. The question that we're asking today is how? How did they move west? The first thing we're going to talk about is waterways. So just as roads are used today, the rivers were used to transport people west during this time because they didn't have, all the cars and that type of stuff. In this map right here, you can see all of the major rivers in North America. You can see that many of them go across more than one state. Which rivers do you see on this map that you think would carry people west? So take a moment to look at that. This map shows you a little bit more clearly which major rivers might have been used out west. The Missouri River, the Platte and North Platte rivers, the Snake River, the Arkansas River. All these were used to travel farther west than we had ever been. Notice the Missouri River is the route that Lewis and Clark took, and I'll use my mouse. Here's the Mississippi River right here, and here we go, Missouri River, and it comes up this way. It goes all the way over to here, where they most likely picked up either the Snake River or they went over the mountains on land, which is what we discussed in class. Excuse me. And then they pick up this river here, the Columbia, that goes out to the Pacific Ocean. Excuse me. Not all the places had rivers or ways to get to rivers, and so because of this, we see the invention of the Canal System. It allowed people to travel by boat westward from a major city. One of those most famous canals is the Erie Canal, and you can see on the map here on the right, the Erie Canal is here. All right. This canal didn't go very far west, but it encouraged movement in that direction and inspired others to move and inspired other inventions as well. The canal is a very simple man-made waterway. It's fairly shallow. The boats would be floated along while being pulled by mules. The downstream lock gate would be open and the boat would be disconnected from the mules and float into the lock. The gate would close, the water would be allowed to fill the lock area. Then the upstream gate would be opened and the mules would reconnect to the boat. The mules would then pull the boat along down the stream. Then the gate would be closed again and the downstream gate would open and be ready for the next boat to come in. That's how the canal system worked. And you can see by this graphic, it kind of walks you through in an animated way. The most common way that people moved west was the overland trail system. The Oregon Trail, was the longest trail. It started in Independence, Missouri, and ended in the Oregon City, Oregon area. This road took 6 months to travel by covered wagon. In order to do this, the families that had to cross the Rocky Mountains, they would travel approximately 2,000 miles through the frontier before they reached where they were going. In order to get people to move out this way, as we purchased different sections of land, the government passed the Homestead Act. This act allowed adult males that had never raised a weapon against the government to purchase approximately 160 acres of land for very cheap. The person then had to move onto the land and live there for 5 years. Many of the people that lived in the eastern United States had come to the United States from other countries, and they took advantage of that Homestead Act in order to start a new life with their own property. The other main trail that led out west was the Santa Fe Trail. It also began in Independence, Missouri, and it ended in Santa Fe, New Mexico. This trail had 5,000 wagons per year traveling on it until the railroad was built out west. So if you do the math, 295,000 wagons traveled along this trail during that time. That is a lot of westward movement. You can see that this 780-mile long trail was mostly through what's current day Missouri, Kansas, and also Colorado and New Mexico into the Santa Fe area, depending on which part you took. So some major points so far from this video are the idea of manifest destiny inspired people to move west. The canal system opened up western travel by water. The canals were a cheaper, easier way to travel west. One major canal that we looked at was the Erie Canal. And also, the people used the Oregon and Santa Fe trails to travel overland, and that traveling overland was difficult and took a long time. Moving on, we see two inventions. So there's some other things that influenced westward migration and aided people in getting west. So this kind of helped move people west. And these are the steamboat and the steam locomotive or train. These two inventions made moving west easier and cheaper for most travelers. The steamboat was used to transport cargo for the most part. It was used on large rivers like the Mississippi and on the Canal System. It was less expensive to transport items via steamboat than it was if you had to put all your stuff on horses and had wagons move your cargo. A major use of the steamboat was transporting goods between the northern parts of the state, or the northern parts of the country and the southern parts of the country. Or remember the concept of interdependence. A lot of raw materials are grown in the southern part of the United States, and our industry, our manufacturing, and our factories is really starting to take off in the northern part of the country. We give credit for the steamboat invention to a man named Robert Fulton. He didn't actually invent the steamboat, but he improved someone else's design so much that he's able to take credit for the invention. The next invention is the steam locomotive. This also made travel faster and cheaper. The railroad industry happens to be a huge part of our economic history as a country. As we see the introduction of the railroad system, we see a lot of people being made very rich during this time as it worked its way across the country. The USA, the government, even decided to buy the Gadsden Purchase solely so they could build a railroad all the way to the Pacific coast. The steam locomotive is actually another one of those really neat machines. The graphic here explains how it works. The railroad worker shovels coal into the burner area, which is labeled number 1. There's water in the main part of the front that would heat up and create steam. The steam would travel down a short tube, which is number 3, and then push on a piston that would crank the gears for the wheels to turn. This propels the train forward. As you can imagine, starting out was very slow, but once the train started moving, it could pick up some really, really serious speed. So they would usually have more than one person shoveling the coal in there to make that hot, 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 so that the steam pushed harder and harder, made the piston move the wheels faster and faster. So these two inventions changed the way that people thought about traveling out west. It went from being something that only the roughest pioneers could face to being something really commercialized for anyone to try. And advertisements during this time were very, very powerful and popular in encouraging people to move out west. So here we go. Here's another set of important points just to recap. The invention of the steamboat allowed western travel to become faster and cheaper. The steamboat opened up trade between northern and southern parts of the USA by using the Mississippi River. The invention of the steam locomotive allowed the railroad to open up the west where the rivers weren't available and overland trails might have seemed too hard for everybody else. All of the inventions of this time made the idea that we've talked about manifest destiny. It seemed like this is really true, really was meant for us to be out there. And advertisers use this idea and the new inventions to get more people to move west and to use their inventions. Finally, I want to talk about two inventions that made life in the West profitable for large landowners, and that's the reaper, invented by Joe Anderson and Cyrus McCormick, and the cotton gin, invented by Eli Whitney. The reaper was invented by a slave named Joe Anderson. He worked on a large farm that grew grain. Harvesting grain at this time was back-breaking and slow work. He worked with a man named Cyrus McCormick to invent a better way to do this. Because of this, large farms that could afford reapers made a ton of money as they increased their production. Smaller farms didn't. Production of the grain grew so much during this time that not only could we feed our own country, but we could start exporting grain to other countries as well. If you look at this picture, you can see that at the bottom of that invention, there's these sharp knives that are coming out. That would cut the grain, and those little spindles that are sticking out would lay the grain down on the ground. So instead of having to stay bent over and carry around a sharp knife, then cutting the grain and gathering the grain up, the man with the horse and the reaper would just drive down one row and cut the grain. It would lay down, and all they had to do was go behind and gather it up. It was a lot easier. Next, we have the cotton gin. This was invented by Eli Whitney. He was visiting a cotton farm and saw how hard it was to separate the seed from the fibers of cotton. And this inspired him to make the cotton gin. And it made the process so much easier because the cotton seed is so sticky that it stuck to all that cotton, and it took forever to get it completely separated. And again, we see an increase in the production of the product. So the cotton product was faster and easier to get a hold of. But there was a really bad thing that happened because of this. Because of this invention, slavery increased. Because more cotton wanted to be grown and planted by those farmers, because now they could go through and process the cotton faster and make more money. So though this was a good invention because it made the process of separating the seed from the cotton a whole lot easier, it was not so good because of that increase in slave labor demand. So final points from this video are Joe Anderson and Cyrus McCormick invented the reaper. This invention increased grain production, but also made it hard for small farms to succeed. Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin, and this made the cotton production increase, but also increased the slave labor on cotton farms. So that's it. I tried to get this short, and I think I did pretty well. There was a lot of information thrown at you during this video, and you might need to go back and watch it again just to make sure that you got it. Make sure you answer the questions on your worksheet, and that you bring that to class tomorrow, and I will see you then. Bye, guys.